Once I was a towering giant.
Greetings and salutations, this is Brian from Mechbladestudios. Well, here we are. 10 years ago, September 15th, 2009, the Bionicle franchise returned to screens in a new movie called Bionicle, The Legend Reborn. Expectations were high for the first Bionicle film to release in 4 years. Disney's Miramax was switched out for Universal's Tinseltown Toons. They even brought in Michael Dorn, an actual actor, to voice God-turned-exile Matanui. This was gonna be great. Once it was released, the fan base wasn't thrilled, calling it the worst of all the films. Were they right? Let's find out. So the 8 years of complex, branching plot and a ton of characters is going to make this movie quite confusing considering 3 years of story have passed, right? On the contrary, this is a soft reboot of sorts. A tiny bit of background is brought up at the beginning, revealing that the Great Spirit Matanui has been awakened, with a twist revealed that the events of 2004 to 2008 have taken place inside Matanui himself, a giant robot housing all the different islands, and that Makuta is taking control of the robot after the Toa Nuva succeeded in their mission. Makuta then imprisoned Matanui's consciousness in the Mask of Life and ejected him from the robot in space. The direct aftermath and consequences were covered in an online story serial, but that's not what we're here to talk about. Everything from the past 8 years, besides knowing who Matanui is and what a Toa is, has become irrelevant. The mask crash lands into the desert planet of Barra Magna, constructing a body for Matanui out of sand. Matanui now has to figure out how to return home to help his people. Already you'll notice a complete overhaul in the art style. Instead of the characters using their toys as a base and being modified to look more dynamic and expressive, the characters are now completely set accurate to a fault. The standardized builds for the toys resulted in extremely skinny torsos and long, gangly, disproportionate arms, all of which are carried over to the characters in the film. The only good part of the sets brought over were the hands, which they finally included as opposed to those hand pieces from the earlier sets. This comes to a baffling head when the protagonists encounter a Scopio in the desert. The toy it's based on is a vehicle based on the supposedly organic creatures shown in the film. This Scopio is so absurdly toy accurate that the vehicle's driver is just flattened and welded into the back and head of the creature. Pins, axles, and their gaps are filled in with these spinning screws and fans that don't even complete full rotations at times. The overhaul of how heads and masks work results in more mixed elements here. Full-face helmets and masks retract and deploy depending on the situation, with the mouths using those of the Iron Man heads for all the characters rather than the masks being their faces.
You're next, Akar. He asked for it.
It's a neat idea, though the addition of teeth was... ugh. The headgear does come with eyebrows, but they match the rest of the colors of their mask or helmet so closely that they're very difficult to see, making emotions hard to read. Textures, on the other hand, have been hugely improved. Barring Matanui, who has only existed in this form for a day or so, everyone else has very detailed pits, scratches, and other signs of wear and tear in their armor, bringing back imagery from the very early comics. Akar, a grizzled veteran, has only a tiny bit of color left in his hands after who knows how many Glatorian battles. For other aesthetics, the backgrounds are unimpressive. The desert looks appropriately barren, even though its sands can't form vehicle tracks. The underground lab of abandoned plots looks neat, but the villages, while their designs are okay, are rendered terribly. Characters rarely look like they're actually in the environments, often looking like they're walking in front of a green screen. The worst downgrade is the music. It's not necessarily bad, but it lacks the majesty of Nathan First's scores. It sounds significantly more generic. The credits themes are okay though. It gave us Bye Bye Babylon by Cryoshell. Lots of stock music and sound effects are thrown in as well. Okay, whoa, hold on, wait a minute, play that one again. No, they didn't. Isn't that one copyrighted? Michael Dorn does well enough with the material, bringing an appropriate gravitas that would come from being a former god, but I can't help but feel that some of his lines sound like he's more bored than stoic. He seems to be taking the fact that an entire universe of people has been enslaved and he could do next to nothing about it in stride. Everyone else, yes, including the infamously peppy Kina, seems to at least try to put in animated performances. Conman Menace's VO, David Leisure, sounds like he's having a lot of fun playing the slimy salesman. The plot just wanders around, showing Matsunui and the audience the ins and outs of Barra Magna, Glatorian combat, the various tribes and politics, and mysterious secrets in some caves, before deciding in the second half that the main conflict should be that Matsunui has to help the friendly tribes combat an alliance made between two hostile tribes. The Bone Hunters and Skrull are bad guys so one-dimensional that none of them besides their leader,
The mighty Chuma!
get any speaking lines. Given how sprawling and multi-tiered 2009 story was as a whole, to the point where characters that got sets don't even appear here, compromises had to be made, but it's nothing new for the Bioncle films. While Mask of Light had a fairly complete rendition of the late 2003 story, Legends of Metru Nui skipped through most of 2004's early story, and Web of Shadows was a complete distillation of 2005's somewhat nebulous story. It just sticks out more here because it's a brand new world with brand new rules, and most of all because The Legend Reborn was meant to be the start of a new trilogy of films, and they wanted to set up future plot points. How are the writers supposed to know that the franchise are going to end in a few months? The only plot line that would ever come to fruition was a very condensed version of the Valley of the Maze alluded to at the end, and the prototype robot made by combining all the villages. The characters, at least as presented in the film, are inoffensive enough, but lack enough depth to really do a deep dive for them. Matsunui's stoic and keeps a transforming beetle named Click with him. Akar's the veteran, Kina's the hyperactive believer in aliens, Dresh is the up-and-coming young guy, and Barracks likes to steal stuff, but otherwise serves as a red herring for the traitor subplot. Metis turns out to be a traitor working for the bad guys, but his only motivation is simple greed. Matsunui turns him into a sneck. Tuma's a joke. He talks a big game but gets beaten by Matsunui in a simple fight. Overall, I give Bionicle The Legend Reborn a 5 out of 10. Yes, it is indeed worse than the Miramax trilogy, but not by much, honestly. Its biggest problems lie in the aesthetic department, looking, sounding, and feeling like a cheap kids film, something all the prior movies managed to avoid, hence why I talked about them first. The characters are thin despite the main cast being smaller than the other films, but the plot, I think, tries the best it can. It had a lot to do in such a short time. It had to introduce a new world, new characters, new rules, and new problems without relying on the now distant Matoran universe, along with dropping hints for future plots, and do all of that in 80 minutes. It can be speculated that this film would have been vindicated by its two sequels, but that obviously didn't happen, so we're stuck with a film that got screwed by being a new beginning to a sudden end, leaving the film unable to stand on its own very well. The lackluster characters and action in particular drag it lower than the first three films, but I can't help but feel bad for it. It's a victim of circumstance. So that's it for me for now. What do you guys think? Have you seen The Legend Reborn? How do you stack it to the older films? Let me know in the comments. If you enjoyed this review, leave a like and subscribe for more reviews of anime, video games, and movies. Also hit that bell icon so you know exactly when a new video goes up, and share this video with someone that might find it helpful. Thanks for watching. This is Brian from Mechbladestudios, signing off.